China's northeastern Jilin city ramps up its protective measures and a hospital shuts down after a nurse gets infected. One of Asia's richest men, Macau gambling king Stanley died peacefully at the age of 98. He built a business empire from scratch. A Chinese doctor forced to flee his homeland. He tells us his story and his lasting bond with a special group of people. As Hong Kongers prepare for a massive protest on Wednesday following Beijing's proposed law, U.S. officials are voicing concern over how Beijing's move will affect U.S. businesses. And tensions have been rising between China and the U.S. on a number of topics, from trade to the virus origin. Now the two countries disagreeing on flight restrictions. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Hong Kong is expecting a tense day on Wednesday. Protesters are calling for a strike against a new proposal by Beijing that threatens the city's autonomy. U.S. officials in the business sector are voicing concern over how the move by Beijing may affect U.S. businesses.
Metal and water-filled barricades are set up around Hong Kong's Legislative Council. Local media reported that over 3,500 riot police officers are at the ready as the city braces for a tense day of protests. On Wednesday, Hong Kong's legislature will hear a controversial bill criminalizing Hong Kongers for disrespecting the Chinese regime's anthem. This, combined with the so-called national security law Beijing proposed last week, are seen as the latest threat looming over Hong Kong's autonomy. The international community is concerned Beijing's move will fundamentally change Hong Kong's freedom of capital and information, as well as its rule of law, the very reason for the city's economic prosperity.
I went directly to the president to get an answer on this, and he said to me that he's displeased with China's efforts and that it's hard to see how Hong Kong can remain a financial hub if China takes over.
White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow told Fox News on Tuesday that what China is doing in Hong Kong is very disturbing. He added that Washington will do what it can to help U.S. companies move back from China and/or Hong Kong. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce stated on Tuesday it would be a serious mistake on many levels to jeopardize Hong Kong's special status. The chamber urged China to de-escalate. Beijing's new proposal will bypass Hong Kong's own legislature and punish behaviors like secession and subversion in Hong Kong. Such charges have been commonly used in mainland China to prosecute political dissidents and human rights activists. Also on Tuesday, the commander of China's military garrison in Hong Kong, Chen Daoxiang, said the garrison will firmly support the new law and enforce decisions made by Beijing's central government. The video accompanying the interview shows footage from last summer when China's military conducted anti-protest drills and marine operations in Hong Kong's Victoria Harbor. Beijing-backed Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam also defended the law on Tuesday. She says it won't hurt the city's freedom. But for many, that's not reassuring, given Beijing's erosion of Hong Kong's freedom even before this law. Last month, Hong Kong police arrested over a dozen major pro-democracy figures. Among them, the founding father of Hong Kong's democracy, 81-year-old Martin Lee, and the founder of Hong Kong's pro-democracy newspaper Apple Daily, Jimmy Lai. In a Tuesday interview with Fox Business, Lai appealed to President Trump for help to sanction China. He said, "This is a time to change China. Without changing China, we will not have peace." Lai added he expects to be arrested again. In Hong Kong, online search of the word immigration have surged after Beijing announced the proposal last week. The trend has even reached people from the pro-Beijing camp. The Chinese-language version of German media DW News reported many Hong Kongers who own businesses in China are also asking about the fastest way to leave Hong Kong. One immigration consultant said, "The more one knows about the CCP, the more scared the person is. One worries about being criminalized for one's speech or retaliated against. One particular concern is of China's security bureau operating in Hong Kong." Over 85,000 American citizens live in Hong Kong, and over 1,300 U.S. firms operate there. That includes all major financial companies. The city returned to China's control under a promise of autonomy in 1997, when Britain's granted years of rule over Hong Kong expired. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Today, the European Council spoke in support of preserving Hong Kong's current one country, two systems after the Chinese regime proposed the new law.
We attach a great importance to the preservation of Hong Kong's high degree of autonomy, in line with the basic law and the international commitments.
He said the EU is in permanent dialogue with the CCP to express their opinions. The law would reduce Hong Kong's separate legal status, and many fear it could also lead to the human rights abuses and discrimination seen in mainland China. It's expected China's legislature will approve the law on Thursday. Worrying scenes in Jilin City. People dressed in protective gear tell residents to come downstairs to collect food and medicine. The residents are then told to go straight home again. Body temperatures are measured at a neighborhood entrance. The person on the loudspeaker says anyone without a face mask will be detained and forced to quarantine. According to an internal document we got, one nurse at a hospital in Jilin City tested positive for the CCP virus on May 15th. 95 people who came into contact with her have been quarantined, including 55 medical staff. We called the hospital and learned it has refused to accept new patients since the day the nurse tested positive. Local media has not been reporting the story. China's health code system was created to track infected people during the pandemic. But the southern Chinese city of Hangzhou plans to continue using the system afterwards. It wants to monitor the health condition of its citizens at all times. Officials then walked back the idea after a wave of opposition, saying it was just an idea. The idea was that information would be collected on your electronic medical record, your health checkups, and your lifestyle choices. Things that impact you include exercise, alcohol consumption, smoking, and so on. For example, you would lose 1.5 points if you drank 200 milliliters of alcohol, or 3 points if you smoked 5 cigarettes. But you'd gain 5 points after you walked 15,000 steps. Some Chinese lawyers called it excessive information gathering. One lawyer told BBC the government should only guarantee citizens' life and food security. Everything else is for the individual to decide. The boundary shouldn't be crossed. BBC quoted netizens as asking, "Why do I have to let my company know I'm seeing a doctor?" Or what about being asked for a health code when looking for a job? Or how about a blind date? Following the US-China trade war and questioning of the CCP virus origin, the US and China are now locking horns over flight restrictions. On May 22nd, the U.S. government accused China of targeting U.S. airlines. It says the airlines are being blocked from resuming flights to China. Chinese carriers are still flying to the U.S., though on a reduced schedule. America says it's preventing U.S. airlines from competing with Chinese carriers on a fair and equal basis. A reporter asked Japan's prime minister about the U.S.-China conflict on Monday. He said as allies, Japan will cooperate with the U.S. He added that it's true that the novel coronavirus spread from China to the world. On the same day, the Japanese government praised what it called the Japan model for controlling the outbreak.
Today, we are lifting the state of emergency across the country.
Japan has relatively few deaths compared to many other major countries, about 800. U.S. biotech company Novavax is the latest company to begin clinical vaccine trials. The company announced it's rolling out phase 1 trials in Australia today. It's the first in the southern hemisphere. Phase 1 will include 130 participants. Results from phase 1 are expected in July. And U.S. drug maker Merck announced today plans to develop a potential vaccine, adding it's partnering with nonprofit IAVI. The drug would be taken orally. The company said in a statement the vaccine candidate would use special technology used in its Ebola vaccine. It was the first such vaccine approved for humans. A Chinese doctor was forced to flee his motherland because he treated a group of patients who are not in the regime's good books, human rights lawyers. Today, we bring you the story of Dr. Zhao and why he had to escape China.
He's an experienced Chinese medicine doctor and had a well-established clinic in Beijing, but now he's been forced to flee the country. His name is Zhao Zhongyuan, and he was doing what a doctor does, treating patients. But what makes him different is many of his patients are Chinese human rights lawyers.
These are human rights lawyers. They are the backbone of Chinese society. Their one and only goal is to change China from a country under the rule of man to one that's under the rule of law.
These lawyers, his patients, have defended the various victims of the Chinese regime's human rights abuses. Their cases include religious groups like Falun Gong practitioners and land seizure victims. But after defending the groups, the lawyers themselves also became targets of the regime's suppression. In 2014, 4 lawyers visited a detention center in northeastern China, seeking the release of illegally detained Falun Gong practitioners. Instead, the lawyers were arrested and tortured.
They have a total of over 20 broken ribs. For Tang Jitian, both his front and back ribs were fractured. I saw their x-ray images. The images police showed them had no sign of injury, but when they did the examination on their own again, after they were released, every one of them had injuries.
他们自己出去一照片子，全出了问题了。
1 year later, in July 2015, about 300 human rights advocates in China were rounded up and interrogated across the country. Many of them had their license suspended, while some were detained or sentenced to jail. The event became known as the 709 crackdown. Among those imprisoned is Beijing-based lawyer Li Heping, who Dr. Zhao personally treated. Li suffered a severe leg injury because he was forced to stand in a military posture every day for 3 months. He told Zhao that police followed him everywhere he went, including the restroom, and controlled every detail of his life.
For example, if you feel itchy on the face and want to scratch it, no, you have to ask for permission first. Report, I need to scratch my face. The police would respond, where? Left side or right side? Left side. Then you are allowed to scratch the left side for 1 time. If you scratch even 1 more time, they will hit you.
Another lawyer Zhao treated, Jiang Tianyong, was severely beaten and couldn't move for 3 months afterward. According to a Human Rights Watch report, other means used to torture rights defenders included sleep deprivation and forced medication. Zhao said his friends also experienced this. Zhao met with several human rights activists online about a decade ago, when the head of a Chinese village who was defending land rights died in a suspicious accident. Zhao was the first person to pay him a visit. The trip resulted in his first police interrogation, but also earned him a group of friends who are similarly pursuing democracy and freedom in China. His clinic in Beijing later became a gathering place for like-minded advocates. After the lawyers were released from prison, they came to him for help and received more than physical treatments.
Once they came to my place, they can now see their like-minded friends. Many of those they know before being imprisoned, and they can communicate with each other. Then they have that sense of safety again, and it would alleviate their anxiety.
While he shared their pain, Zhao was also inspired by the lawyers' courage. In 2015, after the crackdown, very few lawyers were left. Even fewer dared to defend the first lawyer arrested in the roundup, named Wang Yu. But Li Yuhan, an over 60-year-old female lawyer, came to Beijing and immediately took the case. At the same time, she prepared for the worst.
She signed the forms and told the person meeting her, if something bad happens to me, please help me find a lawyer. Think about it, she knew she would be arrested, yet she took Wang's case without hesitation.
She was arrested in 2017 and charged with what the regime called picking quarrels and provoking troubles. She's been in jail since then. As for Zhao, Chinese police had repeatedly harassed him and closely monitored his clinic. Authorities also suspended the medical license for his clinic in 2016, since the families and supporters of the detained human rights lawyers often meet there.
First, they cracked down the media. After the media, they started clamping down on lawyers. After the lawyers, they suppressed those who support these lawyers and the people who supported those at the front line standing up to the regime. One group after another. It's systematic.
In 2019, police interrogated Zhao for the 3rd time after they learned about a lawyer's plan to go to him for treatment. Zhao was handcuffed in a dark room alone for 3 hours. The incident is what prompted his escape to Canada. He and his wife moved there together, leaving his sister and 94-year-old mother behind. Zhao said he no longer has nightmares about being chased by police. He says he hopes the international community will pay more attention to and support those who are still tirelessly defending human rights in China.
Macau gambling king Stanley Ho died peacefully at the age of 98. He built a business empire from scratch in the former Portuguese colony and became one of Asia's richest men.
Stanley Ho, the man who built a gambling empire from scratch in Macau, has died at 98. Ho became one of Asia's richest men, a tycoon in the former Portuguese colony, who headed one of the world's most lucrative gaming businesses. His SJM Holdings owns 19 casinos in Macau, including the iconic Grand Lisboa. Ho also spearheaded Macau's junket VIP system. It sees middlemen act on behalf of casinos by granting credit to gamblers and taking responsibility themselves for collecting the debts. U.S. regulators said Ho was linked to triads or criminal gangs, which he denied. But his swashbuckling business style and philanthropic work won him admiration in Macau and nearby Hong Kong. He lost a 4-decade monopoly on Macau's casinos when the city opened up to competition in 2002. His firm now faces 5 other casino operators, including U.S. billionaire Sheldon Adelson's Sands China. Ho was born in Hong Kong and had 4 wives and 17 known children. In 2012, he was forced to restructure his business after a legal feud erupted within the family over his fortune. Analysts say they don't expect his death to greatly impact day-to-day operations. Some of Ho's children became successful gaming operators in their own right. Daughter Pansy is the co-chair of MGM Resorts' Macau unit, while son Lawrence runs Melco Resorts and Entertainment, which includes the City of Dreams and Studio City resorts.
New York's governor says early projection models for coronavirus or CCP virus cases and death rates were all wrong. And he won't be predicting any more. The state's daily death toll has dropped below 100.
Here's my projection model, here's my projection model. They were all wrong. They were all wrong.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says the early projections given by experts didn't turn out to be accurate, and he won't depend on them again.
Now, people can speculate, people can guess. I think next week, I think 2 weeks, I think a month. I'm out of that business because we all failed at that business.
He said there are no guarantees when certain regions will open, as the number of deaths from the virus and hospitalizations cannot be predicted. He mentioned the statewide criteria that the numbers need to fall continually over a 14-day period before areas can reopen, and said Long Island looks set to achieve it this week. The number of daily deaths from the virus in New York recently dropped below 100. The unprecedented lockdown measures have been largely based on modeling by infectious disease experts. The impact of the resulting economic nosedive has led some to question the models. Speaking on an overcast Memorial Day at the Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum in New York City, thoughts turned to those who had lost their lives. Cuomo said the families of those who had died would receive the appropriate death benefits, saying it's the least we can do. He said asking those on the front line and essential workers to put themselves at risk by working during the crisis weighed heavily on him and still does. He also said we honor the memory of the fallen by living, growing, and advancing the values and principles of America.
Sales have increased for many independent food shops that were allowed to stay open under lockdown. The trend to shop more locally could continue even after things open up. Our UK correspondent Jane Wirrell has the story.
Shelves like this were a common sight in supermarkets across the world as countries imposed strict lockdown measures and people began panic buying. It meant people turned to their local independent shops instead, and some of those customers have kept coming back. For example, a local butcher's, fishmongers and cheese shop here in Greenwich, southeast London, saw their sales double since the lockdown, and the numbers have stayed that way.
All the businesses have had a similar lift in trade. I think the fish shop has actually had the largest increase in trade. I think a lot of people are looking for healthy, they're looking for things that they would normally eat when they go out to a restaurant. We've been selling loads of lobsters.
A survey about how the virus crisis has changed food attitudes shows that more than 19 million, or 38% of Brits, are cooking more from scratch, and 17 million, or 33%, are throwing away less food.
Back to old traditional ways, shopping local, getting to know your butcher, your greengrocer, your fishmonger, buy local, keep everyone happy.
Recent analysis shows an increase in sales of sausage and bacon, staples of a traditional English breakfast.
Those independent businesses on those smaller provincial high streets have a real opportunity to do well, because I think it will take a while for the city centre, funny enough, to recover that lost ground.
He expects people will keep shopping locally after enjoying good service and good quality, combined with a reluctance to use public transport.
Even when we no longer have the lockdown and we are to freely roam the city and do whatever we like, it still would be nice to come here rather than go to like central places.
I kind of would walk past all the time and go, oh, I should go there, and then never did it, and then now I go like several times a week.
The big changes have prompted a shift in people's ways of thinking about food.
And I think during this whole pandemic, we've seen a big shift in just how much people value food, and we've seen food workers become key workers.
And many of those key workers in the food industry have been especially busy during the lockdown. If the predictions are right, at least here, they'll keep serving customers at the same level. Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.
A nurse from Virginia sailed 35 hours on a boat with her husband so she could offer her services in New York City and help virus-stricken patients.
As the CCP virus pandemic shifted hospitals' priorities throughout the United States, nurse Rachel Hartley wasn't being utilized much. Hospitals canceled elective surgeries, so her specialty providing pre-operation anesthesia wasn't needed.
So we canceled our elective cases, so that meant I just wasn't working very much. And I had 3 years of experience as an intensive care nurse before. So it just made me kind of sit in Virginia, like I'm not being utilized and I have these skills. And I'm seeing New York City just being ransacked by the virus.
When New York's governor announced an emergency order allowing nurses from other states to temporarily practice in New York, Hartley and her husband thought deeply, then decided to head there. Hartley had to let go of her job in Virginia.
These patients are some of the sickest patients that I've ever seen, ever cared for before. And just the gravity of the situation. I mean, when you're walking in the hospital, you can see the morgue trucks outside the main entrance. There's such an overflow of mortality and death, sadly.
The couple arrived in New York on their sailboat after 35 hours of sailing the 250 miles from Virginia. Hartley took a contract in the ICU at NYU Langone Hospital.
It's been really special to be able to be in the center of everything and serve on the front lines. And I'm grateful for the skills that I have that can be put to use.
Hartley spends her nights on shift and her days trying to relax on the boat in the city's East River with a view of downtown Manhattan.
On Monday, the White House moved up a travel ban on foreigners who have been to Brazil over the past 2 weeks, just as Brazil's daily death toll from the CCP virus surpassed that of the U.S.
Brazil's daily death toll from coronavirus surpassed that of the United States on Monday. That news came as the White House moved a travel ban on some arrivals from the country up by 2 days. A White House statement moved the start of the ban to midnight on Tuesday, up from Thursday. The ban applies to foreigners traveling to the U.S. who have been in Brazil over the past 2 weeks. The White House did not give a reason for bringing the travel restrictions forward.
Mexico's president says the CCP virus could cost as many as 1 million jobs in the country, as many industries not considered essential remain shut.
The economic pinch of the pandemic in Mexico is hitting a wide range of people, from market sellers to mechanics. And President Andrés Manuel López Obrador says the virus could cost as many as 1 million jobs in his country. Mexico's economy was already in recession before the pandemic struck. Investment banks have predicted a retreat as large as 9% this year. On Sunday, the president tried to paint a rosier picture, touting the promise of new jobs in the future, but with few details.
My prediction is that with coronavirus, 1 million jobs will be lost. But I also want to say that we already have a recovery and new job creation plan.
Right now, Mexico's economy may be in free fall. JP Morgan has projected a steep 40% decline in the second quarter. And on Monday, it posted its worst trade deficit on record.
Here at China in Focus, we dedicate ourselves to bringing you truthful, unbiased reporting. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the latest updates, and see you tomorrow.